SRM University, Ramapuram campus welcomes you to the Department of Civil Engineering and presents to you an insight about the department activities and accomplishments. The Department of Civil Engineering in Ramapuram campus was started during the year 2009, offering both BTech and MTech courses. The department is committed to providing a strong and comprehensive educational program in state-of-the-art learning environment. A number of teaching methods linked in perfect harmony make the learning process for students more interesting. These include guest lectures, seminars, industrial visits, laboratory demonstrations. The state-of-the-art infrastructure includes various laboratories too. The head of Civil Engineering Department has been very instrumental in signing MOUs with highly reputed centers. The Indian Concrete Institute Best Students Award have been won for 3 consecutive years by the department students. The department hosts international conferences such as the International Conference on Advances in Civil Engineering and Chemistry of Innovative Material and the International Conference on Advances in Civil Engineering and Sustainable Construction. National conferences on the quest for advancement in civil engineering have also been conducted by the department. The department is the proud winner of the ICI Students Chapter State Level Appreciation Award. The Indian Concrete Institute Student Chapter Inauguration Function. The department's national level symposium, Srujan, has helped encourage students and ignite their mind with ideas. Regular workshops are conducted for students to gain experience in their field of interest. Student projects are encouraged to provide them with real-time hands-on experience of the subjects. Final year students in teams of 4 received Rs 50,000 and Rs 10,000 cash prizes for first and third best project awards. Our HOD, Dr. Madhavi, received the ISTE Best Women Engineering College Teacher Award for the year 2014. The Department of Civil Engineering has to be commended for acquiring funds for innovative projects and research and development, such as a grant of Rs 55.5 lakhs from the Department of Science and Technology. It also received a grant of Rs 13.5 lakhs from the Department of Atomic Energy for research and development, and many more. The department has also been successful in acquiring funds for national and international events. Numerous consultancy projects have been taken up by the department for the betterment of the campus and its surroundings. Unique activities include getting hands-on experience by working on-site for a week. Civil Department feels proud to present to you its top rankers. Students from the Civil Department are offered placements in well-reputed companies. Once again, SRM University Ramapuram campus welcomes you to the Department of Civil Engineering. University Ramapuram campus welcomes you to the Department of Civil Engineering and presents to you an insight about the department activities and accomplishments. The Department of Civil Engineering in Ramapuram campus was started during the year 2009, offering both BTech and MTech courses. The department is committed to providing a strong and comprehensive educational program in state-of-the-art learning environment. A number of teaching methods linked in perfect harmony make the learning process for students more interesting. These include guest lectures, seminars, industrial visits, laboratory demonstrations. The state-of-the-art infrastructure includes various laboratories too. The head of Civil Engineering Department has been very instrumental in signing MOUs with highly reputed centers. The Indian Concrete Institute Best Students Award have been won for 3 consecutive years by the department students. The department hosts international conferences such as the International Conference on Advances in Civil Engineering and Chemistry of Innovative Material and the International Conference on Advances in Civil Engineering and Sustainable Construction. international conferences on the quest for advancement in civil engineering have also been conducted by the department. The department is the proud winner of the ICI Students Chapter State Level Appreciation Award, the Indian Concrete Institute Student Chapter Inauguration Function. The department's national level symposium, Srujan, has helped encourage students and ignite their mind with ideas. Regular workshops are conducted for students to gain experience in their field of interest. Student projects are encouraged to provide them with real-time hands-on experience of the subjects. Final year students in teams of 4 received Rs 50,000 and Rs 10,000 cash prizes for first and third best project awards. Our HOD, Dr. Madhavi, received the ISTE Best Women Engineering College Teacher Award for the year 2014. The Department of Civil Engineering has to be commended for acquiring funds for innovative projects and research and development, such as a grant of Rs 55.5 lakhs from the Department of Science and Technology. It also received a grant of Rs 13.5 lakhs from the Department of Atomic Energy for research and development, and many more. The department has also been successful in acquiring funds for national and international events. Numerous consultancy projects have been taken up by the department for the betterment of the campus surrounding. Unique activities include getting hands-on experience by working on-site for a week. Civil Department feels proud to present to you its top rankers. Students from the Civil Department are offered placements in well-reputed companies. Once again, SRM University Ramapuram campus welcomes you to the Department of Civil Engineering.
Sir, shall we start, sir? Rameshwaran, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
So, a very warm welcome, Professor Chan. Glad to have you here. You're in, sir? You're hearing me?
Yes,
Professor
yes.
Chan?
Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good
Prof.
morning. Good morning, Professor. So, it's great to have you here. A very warm welcome to India, I should say. Yes. So, virtually, you are in India now.
Yes.
So, yeah. It's something, this COVID is doing good for us also in this way. It is making the world shrunk. Everybody and everything is coming very close to each other. So that way today we are very, very happy to have you here. Professor Chan has very vast experience in construction management, and he is working a lot on low cost housing. And we have been in touch with each other for almost more than 10 years. So I extend a very warm welcome to Professor Chan, and also to all the participants who are here. Uh, you know, they have all logged in about 10-15 minutes, half an hour before also some participants were there. So that shows the amount of interest you have triggered in the participants. So without participants, nothing is possible. So a very warm welcome to all the participants who are present here, and welcome to my faculty and my students who are also here. So thank you very much. With this short welcome to everybody over here for the second day of the International FDP. Tomorrow also, for the information of the speaker, tomorrow also we are having another lecture by a speaker from Turkey. So with this, I would leave it to our faculty, Mr. Rameshwaran, who is going to take it forward. Professor Sir Rameshwaran, sir.
Okay. Good morning to one and all. Everyone present in the second day of the International Faculty Development on the topic Smart Technology in Civil Engineer, organized by Civil Engineer, conducted by SLM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram Campus, Chennai. As the Proverbs say, well begun is half done. Our first day of the FDP programs went well. Now it is time to welcome our respected HOD ma'am, who is a backbone of this event. She was the one who kinded us to have a huge event organized by us. Welcome to HOD ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
It is my duty now to welcome to speaker of Dr. T.K. Sonsar, senior lecturers in construction management and technology at the Faculty of Architecture, Buildings and Planning and University of Melbourne. Welcome, sir. I also welcome the participants for today's session. I wish them a fruitful day. At the last, I would welcome our own faculty members for the event and students also. Now it is time for me to say a few words about the speaker, Dr. T.K. Chan, sir. His research area in the area of construction and economics and technology. His published major engineering construction journal and conference. His recent research project review of Indonesian construction industry and comparison of construction costs across developing and development economics, and spent many years in the petrochemical construction companies in Southeast Asia. He has taught at the School of Civil and Touches Engineers in Singapore and Malaysia University of Science and Technology in Malaysia. He now teaches a wide range of subjects from economics of building and management to more technical topic of concrete and steel touches. And Dr. T.K. Sonsar holds a PhD degree from Cambridge University and bachelor's degree in civil engineer from University of Malaysia. I am honored to welcome you, sir.
So I would now request our speaker, Professor Chan, please take over and commence your lecture. It's sorry.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning to one and all. I would like to share my PowerPoint screen, if I may. Can you all see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good morning. Let me very briefly, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Let me just tell you what I intend to do right now. Many of you would have been traveling around the world before the COVID-19, and you would have noticed that how we build around the world is very different. All right. So I've lived in Singapore, I've lived in the UK, I've lived in Malaysia, and I now live in Australia. I've also visited your SRM campus in Chennai. And when I'm traveling around the world, I am always interested to see uh, the different ways in which we build. And my second question is, why does it cost so much to build in one country and cost less to build in another country? So this is basically what I'm trying to talk about with you guys today. Now, if I were to show you two pictures here, this is on the left-hand side is a residential building in Melbourne, and on the right-hand side is a building in Chennai that I've got off the web. Now, if you look very carefully at the two buildings, you will see that the building on the left in Melbourne is actually a timber frame building. So we use a lot of timber for our residential houses. In India and in many parts of the world, instead of using timber, you use concrete frame with a brick infill for wall. So my question to you, we can have a discussion after the presentation, is what goes into a building? Why do different people in different countries or different builders in different countries build differently? We all know that the input into construction or into building is material, labor, machines, and money, correct? And if you look at a developing country, many developing countries are also pushing to adopt more new technology, which means that your construction will become more and more expensive. So what I'm trying to do, what my research is to ask a few very important questions. Is there an optimum mix? Do we need to use the most modern technology? Or do we use labor-intensive construction methods? And what are the implications for industry development? So how do you improve your building industry? How do you improve your construction industry? So keep all these questions in mind, and I will try to explain. Okay. Can you see on the screen? What I have is building costs across major cities around the world. So what I've done here is I have highlighted Bangalore. I only have one data point for India, and that's Bangalore. So forgive me because all this data was produced by international construction firms, and they have no data for Delhi, Chennai, or Mumbai. So if you look at this data, you will realize that in Asia, the most expensive place to build. Yes, hello. Okay. The most expensive place to build is in Hong Kong, and one of the cheapest places to build is in Bangalore, in India. You have to remember one thing: land cost is not included in this. So this is just construction cost, the cost to build a building. And this is average across various
Professor
building types.
Chan,
Yes.
Professor, sorry for
Yes.
interrupting. Sorry for
No
interrupting.
problem.
Can you just close the PPT once and,
reopen.
and reopen with the option for disable annotation?
Okay, okay. Let me share
Disable for
screen.
annotation.
Escape. It, share screen.
No, in annotation,
Okay.
that is, yeah. There you have options in the annotation
Annotate.
bar.
No, I don't think it's me because I have.
No, no,
Let me see.
not you. It's not you. Somebody else. So you can disable that. You can disable the annotation.
Oh, okay.
No,
Where?
we are close to finding out who is that. Yesterday we could identify. Yeah. It's
Share
and we
record.
are very close to finding out. We are planning to report it at their office, at their official place. We'll report it. We'll do that soon.
You are sharing screen. How do I
In the share screen bar.
disable participant? Okay, okay, got it. Found
Yes,
it.
right. Yes, thank you. Sorry for the disturbance.
No problem. So what I do is I can still clear all drawings. Okay.
Yes. And
And
did
did
you
you
unmute?
unmute?
You have unmuted annotation?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I
Disable,
do not allow
sorry.
participants
Disable
to
annotation.
annotate. Okay, so good. Because I was wondering what was going on. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you look at the building costs across Asia, Bangalore is the cheapest, Hong Kong is the most expensive. Now, I am physically in Melbourne. So if you look at Melbourne, Melbourne is 4 times more expensive than Bangalore in India. My question is, why? And this presentation, hopefully at the end of this presentation, you will understand why. Why can't I move to the next page? Okay, now what I've done here, I have to start to explain what's going on here. Now on the left-hand side, I have sorted countries from Switzerland to Uganda based on World Bank income data. So above 12,000 US dollars, the World Bank classifies them as high income countries. Between Indonesia and Turkey, these are upper middle income countries, more than 4,000 US dollars GNI per capita, and lower middle income, which is where India is above 1,000 US dollars. So once you understand this, so this high income countries are here, lower income countries are at the bottom. So that's on the left-hand side. Now, on the right-hand side, what I've done is I have plotted the skilled workers' hourly wages. So this is how much a skilled worker makes in 1 hour across various countries. This again is in US dollars. So it makes sense, right? That a worker in a richer country or in a high income country makes more money, and a worker in a lower income country makes less money. Now, if you look at this very carefully, you will realize that countries like Qatar, Singapore, UAE, and Oman have wages that are significantly lower than when compared to their income per capita. Why do you think this is happening? This is because many of them have foreign workers working in these countries, all right? So for example, in Qatar, in Singapore, in the Middle East, many of the workers come from another country and work in those high-income countries. Therefore, their wages are significantly lower. Don't worry about that yet. So what I'm trying to say is that workers in high-income countries are paid significantly more than workers in middle-income countries. Let us look at another item, which is concrete. So all of us are civil engineers, right? I think many of us are civil engineers. I'm a civil engineer by training too. So on the left-hand side, it's still the same. On the right-hand side, I am now comparing 1 cubic meter of 30 megapascal concrete, again in US dollars. So if you look at this, you will realize that in some countries, concrete is expensive. In some countries, concrete is cheap. But there is no clear trend, all right? There is no clear trend here. In the lower income countries, concrete is equally expensive. Even though we understand that concrete is a local material, you get your limestone from local quarries, you get your clay from local quarries. So why is it that concrete is expensive in lower income countries? That's an interesting observation. We will talk about that in a little while. Again, on the left-hand side, it's the same. Switzerland to Uganda. But on the right-hand side, I am now looking at structural steel. So these are the steel beams, steel columns that we use for buildings. Structural steel beams per ton, again, it's more expensive in some countries and it's cheap in other countries. What do you notice here? If you look at China, structural steel is cheap. If you look at India, structural steel is cheap. So what I'm trying to show here is that if your country is a producer and exporter of steel, your steel prices are generally low. So what I've done is I've looked at the Indian statistics, and I now find that India is the second largest producer of steel in the world. You are second only to China. So obviously your steel prices are low, all right? As long as you produce and export steel, steel will be relatively cheap in your country. Okay, but what we've done here is comparing all these prices based on US dollars. There are some academics who also use purchasing power parity to compare prices, but it's very hard for us to understand. Okay, what is $1 compared to Indian rupees? What is the conversion rate today? I think it's $1 to 70, 75 rupees. So it's very hard for us to understand conversion rates. So what I'm going to do today is to propose an alternative measure, a new measure, to allow us to compare materials, labor, and technology. So the next slide is something that we have done here in Australia. This is a comparison of material costs with labor costs. So let me explain. 1 cubic meter of concrete is equivalent to 2.3 hours of workers' wages. All right? 1 cubic meter of concrete costs the same as 2.3 hours of an Australian worker's wages. The same 1 cubic meter of concrete is equivalent to 8.5 hours of work of a worker in Malaysia, 40 hours in Indonesia, 75 hours in India. There is no currency conversion. We are just looking at 1 cubic meter of concrete to worker. All right, so I have removed conversion of rupees, conversion of US dollar, conversion of Australian dollars. You look at steel, 1 ton of steel, this is reinforcing steel, is 13.6 hours in Australia, 527 hours in India. Now, so that basically tells us one very important thing. Concrete and steel, or building materials, are relatively cheap in Australia. Building materials are very expensive in a country like India. So, following on the global comparison, so what I've done now is, instead of showing you income on the left side, I have plotted the high income countries on the x-axis. So all the countries are in the x-axis. Switzerland is here. Uganda is there. So these are the higher income countries, and that is the GNI per capita shown over here. So high income countries are over here. Upper middle income countries are here. Lower middle income countries here, and so on. Now, so what I'm plotting is 1 cubic meter of concrete is about 9 hours of wages in Qatar. But concrete is generally cheap in high income countries. Concrete is very expensive in lower income countries. And if you remember what I said previously about foreign workers in Qatar, in Singapore, in the Middle East, in Oman, it basically distorts the prices of concrete in these places. Okay? Now, India. Now, if you look at India, you will realize that concrete is very expensive in India. Okay? When concrete is expensive in India, you will find that many of the construction projects will be trying to use as little concrete as possible while using more labor. So when the conditions in your country is different from another country, you will choose different methods to build. So what I'm trying to say is, look at Australia over here. Australia is over here. So concrete to us is very cheap. Concrete for you is very expensive. Okay? So when you understand these differences in relative costs, you will then begin to understand how to build. So these are some of our findings. Labor is expensive in high-income countries, but concrete is expensive in lower-income countries. So in a place like Australia, we will look for construction processes that reduces labor, because labor is very expensive. Whereas for a country like India, you will use construction methods that will reduce concrete, because concrete is expensive. So you will then try to use more labor and less concrete. Okay, another product, structural steel. 1 ton of structural steel is equivalent to 27 hours of wages. 1 ton of structural steel is equivalent to 534 hours of wages in India. So this is very much the same thinking process. It is very expensive to use structural steel in a lower income country. Look at Indonesia. Indonesia is about the same, 533 hours of wages for 1 equivalent ton of steel. So what we can say about this is that countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, and India, your labor cost is very, very low. If we then, okay, so this is another comparison now. This is comparing 2 materials. So if we then look at steel to concrete ratio, so you now have this combination. You compare steel on one side and concrete on another side. And the ratios look pretty much the same. Reinforcements to concrete, again, it is relatively similar for the rich countries, but reinforcements seem to be expensive for countries that need to import these reinforcing bars or need to import structural steel. If you look at India, India is relatively cheap. All right, so that may be able to help you understand how to convert your construction industry into using the materials that are cheap in India. This is another comparison, bricks to concrete. Now, if you look at bricks to concrete, we are comparing 1,000 bricks. 1,000 bricks is equivalent to 3.9 cubic meters of concrete in Australia. But 1,000 bricks is equivalent to 1 cubic meter of concrete in India. So by looking at this, which material do you think is more economical to use in Australia and to use in India? Can you think about this? Now, if you look at this, it would mean that in Australia, it is cheaper for us to use concrete, and in India, it is cheaper for us to use bricks. Okay? Brick versus concrete. In India, bricks are cheap. In Australia, concrete is cheap. Timber. This is 100 meters of timber used for building. So it's 100 mm by 50 mm cross section. So that's a piece of timber of that cross section, 100 meters in length. Now, 100 meters of timber is equivalent to 1.4 cubic meters of concrete, 2.8 cubic meters of concrete in India, and 7 cubic meters in other parts of the world. So in Australia, timber is cheap. In India, timber is average. So this helps us, again, to understand what materials to use. Okay, and across the world, so this is another comparison of materials all across the world. Now, if you look at India, brick is cheap, timber is somewhere in the middle, all right? So you should understand that when bricks are cheap, you should always try to use more bricks. Now, which are the countries where the bricks are terribly expensive? Middle East. Look at this. Qatar, Middle East is showing very expensive bricks. UAE also is showing that bricks are terribly expensive. If you look at Singapore, timber is very expensive. So it helps explain why certain countries just do not have timber. So for example, Singapore is an island state. Timber would be very expensive out there. So they do not build using timber. So bricks are imported, therefore they are expensive in the Middle East. Bricks are relatively cheap in middle and lower income countries. It is easily available. It is a low technology building product. And my suggestion is that if you are building a lot of buildings, you should be using what you have, what resources you have in your country. All right, if you have lots of brick, you use brick. If you have lots of timber, you use timber. Now, this is an interesting comparison. So now I'm trying to explain how these ratios are used. So I've shown you the ratio of concrete to labor. I've shown you ratios of steel to concrete. So what I'm going to show you here is the ratio of steel to concrete in Australia, Singapore, USA, Canada, Germany, UK, UAE, South Korea, Russia, Turkey, China, and India. And this is data obtained from the year 2000 to 2016 from the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. So there's a database of buildings. And if you look very carefully, you will realize that in the US, they have 20% of the buildings built out of steel. In the UK, 45% of the buildings are built out of steel. South Korea, 17%. China, 50%. What we can see is that if the structural steel to concrete ratio is low, right, like in China, China is the producer of steel. Therefore, they then build half their buildings or half their tall buildings out of steel. What is interesting is India. So your steel price is low, but yet you do not use enough steel in your building processes. So that is something that we can talk about after my presentation. So what I'm trying to say from this slide is this. When the steel to concrete ratio is high, it means that steel is expensive, less steel is used. So we will then use more concrete. When steel to concrete ratio is low, that means that steel is cheap. Therefore, you use more steel and you use less concrete. But of course, India is an exception. So it's something that we can talk about. This is another cost I want to discuss. All of us are civil engineers. So if you look at a reinforced concrete slab, I am working out the cost of a reinforced concrete slab, which is about 200 mm thick. So first of all, you need steel reinforcements. And I've worked out that the average steel reinforcement ratio for a 200 mm thick concrete slab is 150 kilograms per cubic meter. Concrete slab is 200 mm thick, grade 30 concrete, and you need timber formwork to support the concrete. So on this slide, I break down the cost. So that's formwork, reinforcement, and concrete. So the dark blue bit is the labor cost to build, install the formwork, and also to remove the formwork after construction. Green is the reinforcement cost. Blue, light blue, is the concrete cost. Now, if you look at Australia, where I am from, you will realize that half the cost is formwork. 25% steel, 25% concrete. So half the cost goes into formwork because our labor cost is very high and you need workers to cut the formwork, to erect the formwork, and after concreting to remove the formwork. So that is why our labor costs and our total cost for a reinforced concrete slab is close to $250 per square meter. Now, if you then compare that with India, if you look at this little bit here, in India, your labor cost is about 10%, your steel is 50%, your concrete is 40% of the cost. And your total cost of 1 square meter is about $60 US. Can you now see the difference? It is half of our cost is labor. Only 10% of your cost is labor. So what can we learn from this? Formwork cost is very, very high in a high income country because we have to engage workers and workers are expensive. Formwork cost is low in lower income countries due to lower labor costs. All right. And countries with migrant workers, foreign workers, for example, Middle East, will exhibit lower formwork costs because they don't have to pay that much for construction workers. So my question to you in India is this: should you adopt more technology or should you use more labor-intensive construction methods? Something to think about. Okay. Now, this is, if you look at this picture, this is obviously a very manual process of building. This is a photograph taken in Malaysia. So the columns are all using timber formwork. This is all manually assembled. Therefore, this obviously comes from a low labor cost country. Look at this picture over here. Precast concrete columns, metal formwork for the slabs, mesh reinforcements, precast, lift shafts, precast, stairwells. So this is obviously a high labor cost country because everything is prefabricated. Okay, so we've spoken about materials, we've spoken about labor. Let's look at equipment now. This is rental costs for a day for a mobile crane compared to workers' wages 1 hour. So a mobile crane, let's look at Australia. A mobile crane in Australia will be equivalent to about 20 hours of labor's wages. A mobile crane in India is something like 320 hours wages. So if you start comparing this, you will realize that in Australia, a crane is cheap. In India, a crane is expensive. Okay, so for lower income countries, machinery tend to be very expensive. So what I'm trying to say here is this: technology is expensive in lower income countries. So what are the implications for your building industry if they want to develop? What do you have to do? If you have full employment, you may then invest in technology. If you do not have full employment, it may be worthwhile to invest in training your workers, improving workers' income levels, and teaching them to work more productively. Okay, so what I've shown you recently is how to use these ratios. Another way of using these ratios is to identify what these ratios tell you. So you have to learn to use these ratios. And what we can do is, because we've collected construction cost data for the last 50 years. So I can get building costs back to 1972. I will show you how these cost ratios change over 50 years, because our wages will increase faster than material costs. So when your wages increase faster than your material costs, these ratios change. And what I'm trying to show you is four or five different technologies, okay? All of you are civil engineers, so you should be able to identify all these different technologies. Number one, reinforced concrete beam and slab. So that's a timber formwork, reinforcing bars, beams at the sides, and this will be very labor intensive. The second method is the same reinforced concrete slab, but with a metal formwork. So instead of a timber formwork, this is metal, and the metal will remain in place. So this is left in place metal formwork. The third method is post-tension concrete. So we put post-tensioning of pre-stressed strands into the concrete. You may have learned this in your engineering degree. You can also combine post-tension concrete with metal formwork. And the last system we want to talk about is precast concrete. So over here, you can see precast hollow core planks, precast beams, and precast columns. So I'm actually comparing 5 different construction systems. Now, what I've mentioned earlier is this: the labor per hour is here. So you can see that labor costs increased. Concrete material has also increased, but the ratio has decreased. So the ratio of concrete to labor, look at this, concrete to labor was about 8. It then fell and started to stabilize at around 4 or 5. So there is a change in that particular ratio. Now, if you look very closely, I'm sorry for the size of the figures, they're a bit small. On the left-hand side is reinforced concrete, okay? So if you look at 1979, the second system that appeared, which was reinforced concrete with metal formwork, was more expensive. So in 1975, when it was introduced, 1979, 1985, 1987, those period of time, metal formwork was more expensive. But when labor costs increased, you will see that metal formwork became cheaper. Metal formwork after 1990 was cheaper than reinforced concrete. Okay, so when labor cost goes up, certain technologies or our reinforced concrete technology changed. We no longer use reinforced concrete with timber formwork. All our construction becomes metal formwork. Now, if you then look at all the other newer technologies, because our labor cost is so high, metal formwork is cheaper than reinforced concrete. Post-tension with metal formwork is even cheaper. Precast hollow core is the cheapest. So as you can see, we choose to use all these modern technologies because our labor cost is very high, and all these technologies save us money. All right, so what I can say about the study is this: our labor rate increased at 3%, our material rate increased at 5%. That basically means that our concrete to labor cost ratio fell from 8 to 4.7. So labor intensive methods of construction became terribly expensive. Labor saving methods of construction became more competitive. So we have transitioned our construction methods from more labor to more capital. So we are using a lot more materials. We waste materials sometimes because material to us is cheap, labor to us is expensive. So this helps you understand why we choose a particular technology here in Australia. You may have to do the same study in India for you to understand why you are building using the methods that you use. Let's look at this. Tall buildings, whether we are using concrete or steel. Now, if you look at 1970 to 1974, 70% of our tall buildings were steel. 1975 to 1979, 65% of our tall buildings were steel. So if you look at the ratio, back then, it was about 7 or 9. Now, once that ratio went up to more than 10, we switched from building steel structures to reinforced concrete structures. So you can see this, 70%, 65%, and all of a sudden we switched over to concrete structures, 77. And today, most of our buildings, more than 90% of our buildings are built out of concrete. So that helps explain or demonstrate how we change from one material when steel was cheap to concrete when steel has become more expensive. So that again is is an interesting comparison, because steel versus concrete ratio changed. It became, or it increased to more than 13 after 2005, and we moved from building out of steel to building using concrete. So what I'm trying to say is this: the choice of building technology is based on material cost ratios. You will have to use what is abundant in your country, because things like cement, bricks, and timber are very often locally produced. So you will have to check if these materials are easily available. If it is, you build using these materials. If you have to import materials, use them very carefully, because the value add is then lost overseas. If you have to buy these materials from overseas, you will lose a lot of revenue and your construction cost goes up. What I want to talk about now is to maybe introduce some of the newer building materials to you This is a new product that has been used in Australia for the last 10, 15 years. It's called cross-laminated timber. You may be aware of the old timber where it is just pieces of plank, pieces of timber pieces to build buildings. Now, cross-laminated timber is almost like plywood. It's layers of timber glued together to make panels. So these are some of the panels that were sent to the university for testing. We have worked together with some testing labs to make sure that these panels work as a composite panel between concrete and timber. But what I'm going to show you on the next slide is a building that is mainly structural timber. So this building here in Melbourne uses cross-laminated timber for the floor, for the beams, and for the columns. So this is an entirely timber building, and it's built using cross-laminated timber. And this is the finished product. It is a library, and the library is right next to the sea. And if you still remember your structural engineering approach, timber is good when it's exposed to sea spray or salt water. Therefore, this building was built out of timber as opposed to steel or concrete, right? Because timber, number one, doesn't rust when it's exposed to seawater. Number two, it captures carbon. So we consider this as a very sustainable way to build. Very green. Okay, so what have we learned today? In terms of industry, where you can or how you can improve your Indian construction industry, I would suggest that you think about these three things. You always try to invest in training of your workers. You always try to improve overall output per worker or improve labor productivity. In terms of materials, you will try as much as possible to use locally available materials because this gives you the lowest construction cost. It also increases the value that you add to your local economy. And the idea here is to always try to grow your local supply chain, but maintain resource efficiency. So you have to make sure that if you're buying bricks, you ensure that all your suppliers, the transportation, the logistics of all that is well organized. You will also try to encourage sustainable practices. So if you are getting timber, your timber has to come from sustainable forests. For example, or even bricks, you have to ensure that the energy you use to make those bricks, energy for your steel making, and all that is sustainable. Now, the most important bit is technology. You have to advise the construction industry on what technologies to use. Okay, is precast the best technology? Is precast, does precast make sense in a country where labor cost is low? You will have to work out the cost and advise your construction industry accordingly. You have to use some of these tools and prove to yourself that maybe cast in place construction technology may be overall cheaper than precast. Post-tension concrete, pre-stressed concrete, metal formwork, all those technologies are used in many high-income countries, but may not be useful in India. All right. So there are various industry development issues that you need to think about. What I've shown you on the earlier slide was more for workers, but for companies should invest in training. They should build capacity. And for the government, they would then have to think about a national development strategy for your construction industry. Now, I'm not planning to speak for a full 1 hour because I think we should spend time to discuss some of the questions that you have. So what I'm going to show you now is if you need to have to find more information about the data that I've shown you. Many of the cost data comes from Turner and Townsend's International Construction Market Survey. This is 2018. I think there's a 2019 book coming out soon, or maybe may have come out. So these are all cost consultants, Turner Townsend, Arcadis, and Cordell. These are the companies that produces cost data. Now, that's my contact details. If you need to get in touch with me, that's my email, and that's my mobile number if you need to WhatsApp to me. Thank you very much. And I think I'll stop here so that you can ask questions.
Yes, sir. Professor Chan, there's no doubt that it's a wonderful presentation. You have given the economics of construction very cleanly and very neatly, why it is different in different countries and how we should go about it. So thanks for this awesome presentation. And now I would leave the forum open for the question and answers. So, you can post your questions in the chat box. The chat is open now. You can post your questions in the chat box. Professor Chan, you have a lot of compliments coming in.
Yes, yes.
Participants
Everybody
are-
says thank
yeah.
you. Yes, yes. But I'm
Yes,
more
yes.
interested to
Yes.
see how
Yes,
you
we
can
have one
apply
question
this.
here. Yes.
If you use timber instead of concrete, we face many problems in the environment. Yes, I agree with you. So your timber has to come from sustainable sources. In Australia, we have timber plantations. So we are not allowed to cut the forest. They actually plant these trees. The trees will grow for about 10, 15 years, and then we cut them down to make these cross-laminated timber. Now, you now understand why they are using cross-laminated timber as a sustainable product, because it glues together smaller pieces of timber. So you can use small trees. Previously, you had to wait 100 years for the forest to grow. And when you cut them down, then the timber is no longer green. And that is why they are using cross-laminated timber. Let me see, there are lots of comments. I can't, let me see. How do you compare the cost of construction? I don't think you need to compare the cost of construction. Try not to compare, because you can't buy a building here in Melbourne and take it back to India. You built in Chennai, you use Chennai products. So what I'm trying to say is, don't use PPP to compare. It doesn't make sense. You are in Chennai. You are using materials from Chennai. You are using labor from Chennai. So just think about your Chennai figures.
Yeah. There's also a complaint that Indian labor is not skilled. And if we were skilled, if we use skilled labor, then the cost of construction would increase more.
Yes, I agree with you, Prof. But that's also good, because then your construction workers make more money.
Yeah, this is a question
wrong
from
with that?
Puneet. Yeah, this has been raised by Puneet Kumar. Yeah.
Yes. I think I agree that you have to train your workers so that they make more money. Something's wrong with my video. Is my video frozen? Can you all still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but
Okay,
your video
I
is
think
not seen.
my video is stuck. Yes. I will continue to answer questions with